Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Start With What? This is a podcast series about the world's worst OKR advice and the world's worst OKR introduction. It's basically about how to burn money and alienate people with OKRs. I am Sandy. I'm an OKR coach and consultant.
And I'm Alessia, and I also work as a OKR coach and consultant. And something that we want to emphasize right in the beginning is that, spoiler alert, this will be a podcast filled of facepalm moments where you will going to think, oh my God, we did that too. And that's totally okay because we've all been there. You're not suffering alone from your OKR mistakes. Believe me, we have done our fair share of them. And yeah, so this is more about laughing about our own mistakes together and not about finger pointing. So that's just something we want to make sure that we all know in the beginning.
Exactly. Humor is always a good start.
Yes, perfect. And so, what we want to look at today is the prep phase of OKRs and all the great mistakes that you can do in this phase. We have prepared 4 different aspects that we want to talk about. And we are going to dive right in with the first one, which is fittingly also what gave a name to our beautiful podcast. And it's the advice, start with what? What do you have to say about that, Sandy?
Start with what? So this is basically before you start with OKRs, you can do like a lot of mistakes. So start with what kind of refers to Simon Sinek's golden circle. Go to your favorite search engine / AI to ask about that if you don't know already. But it basically emphasizes that the first mistake that you can make is like focusing on the things you do. Like we want to work with OKRs, but never ask the question, why? Like what problem do you want to solve? What are the challenges that you wish to solve with OKRs? What do you want to optimize for? And I think like both of us, Alessia and I, we've had our fair share of clients that came to us with that exact inquiry, right? We want to work with OKRs. And when you ask them, like, okay, why? Why do you want to work with OKRs? They cannot answer you. So please make up your mind about this.
Yeah, and I think the worst part about it is that they kind of look at you weirdly when you ask, like, why do you want to do this? Like, what do you want to do this for? And what are you telling people? What problems are we solving with this? Like, this seems to be like a very revolutionary question. And that's kind of a problem, right? Because you need to, if you want to spend money on something, and OKRs cost money, you actually need to know how you will be able to see if you're successful. And that's just very, I mean, the most extreme example of that I've witnessed was one CEO playing golf with the other one and then coming back to his company and being like, we need OKRs. They're doing that too. So that's about the extent of it, or basically just reading a blog article about it. And then just saying like, I'm starting from the solution and not asking what problem I'm solving with that. And if there's anything you can do to make life for OKR coaches like us easier, think about that before you call us. That would be a
And
great
for
start.
yourself, like when you
Yeah,
don't know that, it
100%.
will go through, like this problem will stay with you throughout the whole introduction, not just in the prep phase, but as we mentioned, this is a series. So we're just looking at the prep phase today, but we have like a lot of other phases that we look at. And if you don't ask yourself why, it will pop up in every step of your OKR introduction, of your work with OKRs. I mean, it's a very good question for life in general, I think, but especially here when we go deeper into the other phases and also the other 3 worst practices that we have for you today, you will find like this is a pattern that is not very helpful.
And that also explains why we named the whole podcast like that, because that's usually what people get wrong about OKR introductions in general. They start following rules they have read somewhere, but don't question what do these rules mean to me, or like what are they supposed to accomplish, and is the way of following the rule like the only way of accomplishing what I want to do. So that's what we kind of like all invite you to do, to not take any like OKR advice for granted and just say like, oh, but Sandy or Alessia like said told us to do that, but asking like, so what did they optimize for when they told us that? Like, what does, I don't know, having metric key results, what does that have to do with what effect do we want to have with that? And that's kind of like what we want you to think about, and not just saying like, oh, we need a metric there, and if we don't have a metric in the key result, then the world is going to end. Like that's
It's true.
the exact opposite of what we want to do. So but yeah, that's that would be our first advice. Start with what if you want to have a horrible OKR introduction.
Yeah, kick it off the right way / wrong way and start with what? All right. This was our first worst advice. And the next one would be another classic. Don't get your key stakeholders involved. Alessia, do we have any anecdotes for that?
That's one of my favorite ones because it just shows that a bit of the mindset that is behind that, right? It's kind of like an old school mindset where I'm like, I'm maybe the person responsible for strategy execution, and I will just do that because I told people to do it. But that's basically not how modern day organizations work or how people work, right? You need to lobby for it. You need to explain to people the why of why you want to do things and what is in them in it for them as well. And one of my favorite things is favorite mistakes it's not involving leadership, because OKRs basically mean a change of leadership mindset, maybe a way, if you're doing it the ideal way, going away from just top-down input and just like having more conversations around this. And this has such a great impact on how teams are going to work in the future if you change the way they strategically think and you do kind of sense making around these things. And not involving them at all and not just telling them, you just go to a class, just go to this OKR class. We're doing OKRs, and that's all you're going to know. And everything else, Sandy / Alessia are going to tell you about this. And that's just not the kind of pre-work or setup that, I don't know, is successful usually.
Yeah. Or not even have like an OKR introduction class at all. It's just like blurting out, okay, like this is the thing we're doing. Like start with what? We're doing OKRs now.
Yeah. Go
And
ahead. Don't
go
question
ahead,
things,
and not
please.
involving anyone. Like, for example, in Germany, the Betriebsrat.
Yeah, the
So,
workers' council. Yeah.
yeah. That could be very, like the discussions that you will have after, like when you're way underway, will be, like horrible because they haven't been involved early. Or other, other C-level people who are responsible for their own like departments and business units and are responsible for the strategy there, and they don't know, and then
And
suddenly,
maybe already they have like a different way of approaching it, right? That's also
yeah, exactly.
sometimes the case. So yeah. If you want everything to fail, please don't involve anyone and just make a top-down decision. This will work. Not.
Not.
Another
Exactly.
thing that's super common to do is basically if you start approaching it, you start reading books, right? And the most common books in one of the most common books in the OKR space is Measure What Matters. And that's totally valid to read Measure What Matters. But if you want to make sure that your OKR introduction fails miserably, please only read Measure What Matters, no contemporary OKR theory or practices, and follow the book meticulously. Please, Sandy, could you explain to us why this will lead to a failure in the OKR introduction?
Yeah, so the people who approached me with, hey, we want to do OKRs and I've read Measure What Matters and we want to do it that way, like those encounters are countless, right? So I've experienced this so often. And the thing with this book is I think it's what it's good for is to get people excited, right? So to get like C-level excited about OKRs. What it's not good for is like you just said, like to follow it meticulously. This kind of ties into start with what, right? So because it gives you kind of like a step-by-step guide or advice how to do OKRs from the point of view of John Doerr. Chandler is the author of Measure What Matters, if you didn't already know.
And which is very tempting as well, right? Like, this is what
Yeah.
you need to do.
Yeah. So let's do it. And the thing with the book is that while it's good to get people excited, he kind of contradicts himself sometimes in this book. So we will come to that later when we look at like objectives and key results in detail and like what characteristics they have. But one characteristic of a key result, for example, is that it's measurable, right? So we have a metric there. And he emphasizes that in one page, and then like 2 pages later, he will have an example with a binary key result with no metric inside. Or he would, like tell you, oh, don't put your KPIs in your key results. And then one example later, sure enough, there's the KPI and
Revenue, yay.
yeah,
And that's
revenue.
also a thing, right? It's if it's not defined what you see a KPI as, like how can you make that rule as well, right?
Exactly. So it's kind of a little bit confusing, and it like gives you the illusion of control, right? So like you said, it's very tempting. You have like a step-by-step guide. We follow these rules of this guy who brought OKRs to Google, so he's kind of like a god, whatever. It just creates the illusion of like safety and control, whereas you don't have that, and that also ties into this start with what approach, right? So we do this because Chandler says he did this at Google. We do this because Chandler says he did that at Google. But what works for one company doesn't work for another company. That's why we started this podcast with this approach, like the worst advice, because we cannot give you like a one size fits all recipe for success, but what we can give you is like a recipe for disaster, and tell you stories around that.
And that's the ironic thing, right? That everybody who has been working with OKRs and has kind of like a product mindset and agile mindset, in the beginning, we all start with these ideals, right? With this, oh my God, like we need to follow John Durn, he's so right, and everything else is wrong. So we're very inspired by that. But the more you experience these OKR introductions, and between us two, we have like 15 years of OKR experience or more, we actually realize that things don't work that way. Because we have tested and validated it. So if you ask anybody who has been at this game for longer, they will all steer you away from that and steer you more towards validated best practices that we have seen work and that also vary though from company to company. So we get that this is complex and we're kind of all looking for like simple answers to it, but it actually depends. It depends on your company. And this is why we want you to take from this the things not to do and also, yeah, knowing why you're not supposed to do them. That's what we're here to explain.
Exactly. So what we're doing here is, I mean, so when you introduce OKRs, you can do whatever you want, right? You can follow our worst advice and do it anyways, or whatever, but just be aware of what kind of behavior that encourages, what it prevents, right? So we just want to create awareness around that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if you want to fail fast, just read Measure What Matters and follow it meticulously.
Very fast.
Okay, our fourth and last worst advice for today is, you said it earlier, OKRs cost money, but not only that, don't allocate any resources.
That's one of my favorites because people come knocking at our doors, I dare say, and say, we want to do a little OKR. Like we want to just like start with OKRs, and we kind of think that if we just do like it's just 2 draftings a year or 3 draftings a year, then we will be fine. And it's not very much like work to do behind it. People just like need to write OKRs, right? That's not that hard. But what that kind of like attitude doesn't really see is that this is a change process, and change processes cost like money and human resources and time to learn, and also that kind of like that's These are the things that are ignored quite often. People just feel like it's super easy to introduce. It's easy to understand, but complex to introduce. That's kind of like the main issue with it. So I actually also have turned down, let's say, projects that said, no, like you're not going to get somebody on the ground from our team that will work with us and will like steer the entire OKR direction from the ground, because that's what you need to do. And it's a painful thing, but in the end, how much time are you like how much money are you spending in people not following like strategic thoughts and just doing whatever comes up, right? Like how much money are you losing if you don't invest at all in kind of like steering? That's always kind of like one of my arguments, but it's kind of like a painful, yeah, it's kind of a painful discussion sometimes if people go in and are quite like, I think this is going to just work with just a couple of pennies or a couple of trainings. Yeah, it's
Exactly.
always a,
And it also ties into the like worst advice from before, like read, measure what matters, and follow the book meticulously. I think this is also the desire to like save money, because there's so many like free resources out there, or like low cost resources, like the price of a book, you know. And a lot of my clients, or the clients that I've worked with, they started on their own, which is fine, but they just follow like measure what matters, for example, and then they don't invest in people like really immersing themselves into the topic, have outside help from coaches and consultants, because it's a complex thing, right? So you cannot read it in a book and then suddenly be able to do it. It's like saying, hey, I've never played soccer. Let's see what kind of books are out there, or just watch a YouTube video, and then, well, doesn't seem too hard to shoot a straight ball or a curved ball, and then suddenly you see, well, it's not that easy. So you need people to, you know, like coach you and consult you through this at some point, and not allocating any resources to it will most likely set you up for failure.
yeah, because it's a system that is not self-maintained. Like it's not something that you do once. It's not a one-time change. It's something that you need to do every time, and people are people and are involved in the daily business. They will forget about OKR draftings if you don't like, have somebody behind that making sure that this is coming. And also, like we're still, most of us live in a world where it's top-down kind of like management in companies as well. Like it has been loosened up a bit, like the pathways or for communications are more open, I feel like, but it's still like if nobody cares from management about my OKRs and doesn't give any money for it, then it must not be very important, right? Like if this project is not funded, then it doesn't matter. And that's kind of like the reality we have to face sometimes as well.
Exactly. So don't waste any money. Just buy a book, or ask, you know, your AI of your choice.
To plan the OKR instruction for you.
Yeah, that's kind of a free OKR consultant. Here you go, and never look back. So I
Yeah.
guess these are our four worst advices for the prep phase. Do you want to sum this up for us, Alessia?
Yes. So, advice number one is please always start with what. If you want your OKR introduction to fail miserably, don't think about why you're doing it. Just do it. Just do it, right? Like Nike said, just do it.
Oh,
Um,
we're not sponsored by Nike, by the way.
and don't ever explain to people why they need to do this. Just make sure that they are actually doing it. The second advice is please don't get any stakeholders on board. Just do things in secret and then like let like the bomb pop and let people go to trainings and things like that. And please don't do any prep work before you kind of like roll out OKRs. You don't need to do that.
Hmm.
Then the third advice is please only read one book, only read Measure What Matters, and just follow it and ignore those little kind of like mishaps and like gaps in the logic. And please stay away from very good and contemporary books that actually give you great OKR advice. That's the worst thing you can do. And then the fourth advice is please don't at all allocate any resources because otherwise you might run the risk of your OKR introduction actually succeeding. And we don't want that, right?
No, fail fast.
Fail fast and fail often, right? So yeah, those have been our four little pieces of worst OKR advice. So you can make sure to fail fast and burn a lot of money and alienate people with OKRs.
Start with what?
See you next time.